and welcome back to RubberStamps.com. Today we are doing another practice prompt. Today's practice prompt is shaker cards. So today for the practice prompt, we are going to be practicing some of the skills that it takes to make shaker cards. We're going to go over a few different techniques and different ways that you can create these shaker cards, but this is just a really great way to practice the skills that are needed without jumping right into making a card. It kind of takes the pressure off, so you're not using your really nice paper or really nice crafting supplies that you have reserved for actual cards, but this gives you an opportunity to practice the skills that you need before actually creating the card. But before we get started, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to our channel to see more content like this. So today's tutorial is specifically going to be creating shaker cards without using a die cutting machine or using a Cricut. Both of those are options. I don't have a die cutting machine. I do have a Cricut, but I'm going to show you some techniques for how you can make these cards without either of those options. The first thing that we're going to be going over is cutting out different shapes for your shaker card. Like I said, this tutorial is for those who don't have a Cricut or a die cutter. This is going to be a very easy way to make a shaker card and do the cutouts with items that you just have at home. I do think it's worth it to practice cutting out a few different shapes before you actually create cards, just so that you get the practice in, you know how it feels, and you have a few different shapes under your belt. The most simple and straightforward shape to cut out is a circle. So just using the supplies that you have at home, find a circle shape that's about the right size for your card, put it on the back of your cardstock, take a pencil and trace. And then use your X-Acto knife or a pair of scissors to cut out the shape. This is a very straightforward and easy technique. Most people have scissors or an X-Acto knife, and really that's all you need to create this shaker card. Right, then the shape pops right out of the paper, and then you flip it over and you have your shape. And this is a good example of why it's helpful to practice these skills before creating the cards, because you can see that I messed up on a few of the spots on this cutout. It's a little flat right here. I ripped the paper a little bit here and here. But since this is just practice, it doesn't matter. We're just learning the skills. So this is the easiest shape, I think, a circle. Another very easy shape would be a square or a rectangle. But if you wanted to do something a little more complicated, you could find something like this heart, or a star, a sun shape. Really, the sky's the limit if you just find something that's the appropriate size for your card. So once again, we're just gonna place this on the back, take your pencil, and trace. And once again, take your X-Acto knife and cut it out. And once again, a good example of why you should practice. I ripped the paper right there and right there, but since this is just for practice, that's okay. If I was going to keep going and practicing, I would redo both of these until I feel confident with my skills in cutting these out, because this is not up to par for what I would want in my actual card. So I would just keep going until I feel like I've mastered this first step. But for the sake of this video, we are going to move on to the next skill. The next thing that I want to talk about are some of the options that you have for this clear part of the card. So the first option is using these little cellophane baggies. You can actually buy these from Amazon, craft websites. There are a lot of different places you can get these. These are really easy because 3 of the sides are already sealed, so you don't have to do much to make these ready for use. Really, all you need to do is peel off this top layer and fold it down to seal the top edge. and that's ready to go. Really, you would just take that and stick it there, and it's ready to go. So this is a very easy, beginner-friendly option because it's already sealed on 3 sides, so there's not a whole lot that you have to do with the cellophane baggies. The next option is these little acetate sheets. You can also buy these online. These are a little bit thicker of a material than the cellophane baggies. This one you need to be a lot more careful with sealing around the edges because it does not come pre-sealed, and you're going to sandwich it between your top layer and bottom layer, and you just have to be much more careful with sealing the edges so none of the insides fall out. There are some variations with the acetate sheets. You can use things like decorated acetate sheets. You've got a silver side or a red side. You could use these card inserts from Cricut. You've got a lot of options there, but again, they're clear with just a little bit of extra decoration on top, and you would use these the same way that you use these acetate sheets, just being more careful with sealing in the edges. And then another option is using vellum. This is, I would say the thickness of this is pretty similar to the acetate sheets, maybe a little thicker. But the thing to know about this is that it is slightly opaque. You can still see through, but it's not going to be completely clear. But this is definitely a really cool look. I would use this for maybe like a frosted window Christmas card. There are a lot of really fun things that you could do with this, with just having a little bit opacity before you see the glitter inside. So we're going to come back to these different options and practice with both of these. But before we do that, I want to talk about some of the options that you have for the insides of the shaker card. The first option that you have is confetti. This is what we used in this card. This is actually kind of a glitter confetti, but confetti of any sort is really fun to put in shaker cards. The next option would be glitter. This one's really pretty. The one thing that I do like to recommend when using glitter is just to be very aware of the size of glitter that you're using. These are bigger chunks of glitter. If you start using the really, really fine glitter, even though you've sealed the edges as well as you can, that fine glitter will sneak out through the sides. It's just a lot harder to keep that inside no matter how good you seal it. It's not guaranteed to stay inside. So I just like to stick with the larger chunks of glitter for these shaker cards. Another option that you have would be fun little elements like this. These are just little paper flowers that you can use for scrapbooking or card making. You can get this kind of thing at any craft store, any online store really, and the sky's the limit for that kind of thing. The biggest thing to be aware of is the size. You don't want to go too big with these, otherwise they don't move around and they just kind of get stuck to each other in a clump in the card. And then the final option that I want to go over is actually making some of your own elements to put inside the card. This works really well with some of the smaller stamps that we have. For this, I'm going to use these 3 hearts that I have put on my stamp block already, and I'm going to use 3 different shades of ink and show you just how easy this is to make your own little elements for the shaker cards. Right, and here are the 3 hearts, and this is just to show you that you can make your own elements for the shaker card. And the third thing that I want to mention before we start putting this together is to just be aware of your background. So we have the front layer, then we'll have the shaker elements on the inside, and just be aware of what the layer is that you're gluing this on top of. You could do it plain white if that's what you want. You could choose a pattern of some sort. You could stamp on the background and make your own unique background. There are a lot of options, and we will show you a few of those as we continue with this tutorial, but I just wanted to mention before we start putting this together, always be aware of your background. Choose that very carefully before you glue everything together. Alright, so the first option that we're going to go over is using the cellophane baggies. Again, this is a very beginner-friendly material, so that's why we're going to start with this one. We're also going to keep this simple, and we're just going to use these hearts that we created with our own stamps. Alright, so we added our hearts to the cellophane baggie. Because this is sealed on these 3 sides, you don't need to worry about that. You just remove the top protectant, fold it over, and seal. If you wanted to be extra careful, you could take this tape glue runner and just add a layer of that before you glued that down, but I think we're just going to do this and call it good. Alright, and the next step is what we call making the sandwich. So if you think of a sandwich, it's made in layers. So the same can be said for the shaker card. You have layers to the card. This cutout is going to be your top layer, followed by this shaker, which will be glued directly to the top layer. And then you have your bottom layer, which we will use 3D adhesive dots to glue this to the bottom layer. So the first step is to take your glue tape runner, figure out which side is the top, and you are actually going to put the glue on the top side of the cellophane baggie. So we're just going to take this and go right around the edges. And for this, you're going to do all 4 sides. Then you're going to take the top layer and glue it down. Alright, now these 2 layers are connected. Now you're going to take these 3D adhesive dots and put them on the bottom layer. Make sure you do all 4 corners. You can also get a little bit closer to the edge to make sure that the card is not flopping in the center. But we're going to start with the 4 corners. And then put a few more in various spots. There. And here is the first one that we practiced with. A few things that I learned during this practice is that the cellophane baggies are a little bit more narrow than I was expecting when I created this heart shape. So it might be better suited to a smaller shape like this circle where you won't be able to see the edges because the edges are showing through a little bit because my heart shape was a little too wide. But this gives you the idea of what it's like to use the cellophane baggies. Alright, and the next one that we are going to go over is using acetate sheets. I think I'm going to do this fun pattern instead of the clear one because they actually do work the same. I just like this pattern, so we're going to go with that. Using these is a little more complicated than using the cellophane baggies because we do need to seal in the edges. So for this one, the first step is to glue this to the back side of the front layer. So we're going to take this tape glue runner, glue this down so that when you flip it over, it's glued to the back of the front. So that's the first step that we're going to do. This part does not need to be sealed that well. This isn't where the seal comes. This isn't where the seal comes from. This is just to keep this layer adhered to the top layer. That's pretty straightforward. That step is done. The next thing that we're going to do is use this. Here's the package that it came in. It's just Crafters Square Pop Dot Tape. So it's just an adhesive that comes in the form of a strip rather than these 3D adhesive dots. So it's the same material, this is just in a strip versus the dots. The biggest thing to remember here is that this is what seals the confetti to the inside. So we don't want there to be any holes as we seal around the edges right here. So we're just going to start peeling off some of this strip, and we're going to go around the edges of this circle. Because this is not a circle, it doesn't matter that this is going to be a little wonky on the inside as long as it is completely sealed. Luckily, this is a flexible material, so you can kind of bend it as you go along. You could also cut it into little tiny strips. Just make sure that if you do it that way, that all of the edges are completely connected so that none of the glitter can sneak through. All right, we made it to the end, so I'm just going to take my scissors and cut it right there. Perfect. Then you're going to remove the top layer. Next, we're going to take our confetti, and I think I'm actually going to mix it with this glitter. That's going to be super fun. That's another thing that you can do. You can actually combine what you put in these shakers. It doesn't have to be all the same thing. So this glitter would actually be really pretty with these pink hearts. But for this, we're going to combine the glitter and the confetti. All right, that looks like a good amount. You don't want to put too much in your shaker cards because then it just gets overwhelming. You can't see what's on the back side. There's too much to look at. Sometimes if you do put way too much in, they have a harder time moving around. So just be aware of the amount of glitter or whatever it is that you're putting inside. Don't put in too much. Continuing with our polka dot theme, I think I'm going to use this really fun paper, but because it's on the thinner side, I'm actually going to glue it to this cardstock first. All right, I have my backing ready to go. What we're going to do is flip it over so this is on the front and glue it down. But one thing I want to just mention is that this is a raised adhesive, so if we don't want the rest of the card to kind of flop down on these other edges, we can add these 3D adhesive dots just to give it a little bit of lift so that it all stays at the same level once it's glued together. All right, so once again, we're going to just take this, flip it over, and glue. Make sure you really press down around that circle so that we are for sure sealing in the edge and the glitter doesn't come out. All right, there you go. That is super fun. I think that having the combination of all the polka dots and the two different types of glitter makes for a really fun card. So now we have both of these options, the cellophane baggie, the acetate sheets, and finally we are going to go over vellum. All right, so when we're working with vellum, it often comes in bigger sheets like this. So the first thing that we need to do is cut it down to size. So once again, the very first step is gluing this to the top layer. So we're going to take our glue runner. All right, and glue that down. I'm going to flip it over this way. All right, first step is done. Next, we are going to take this again, and we're going to go around the perimeter, just like we did for the acetate. And then we're going to take this and add a second layer. So because we added 2 layers of this, when we add the adhesive dots, we're also going to double those up as well. Alright, and then it is time to put the sandwich together. I'm doing this in reverse order, so I'm taking the bottom, flipping it over, and gluing it to the top. Again, making sure that this edge is really well sealed. And then you flip it over, you have your shaker card. Something I just learned with this one, you can see that I put too many in here, so they're having a hard time moving around when I shake them. That's not because of the adhesive or anything else that I did wrong, it's simply because I have too many flowers in there, so they're not moving around because there's not enough room. And in today's practice prompt, we tried 3 different techniques for making shaker cards. We hope this video was helpful. Stay tuned for our next part of this class, where we will be putting this all together to create our very own shaker card. Thank you so much for watching. We will see you next time.